what point do my cute, adorable brown boys become a threat to somebody? What point do they stop being cute and adorable and start looking like a thug? At what point do they have their music up too loud and somebody doesn't like it? Or they're walking in a space where somebody doesn't think they should be? That's difficult. It's very difficult.
Hello, dear ones, and welcome back to Unbroken Chain. How are you guys doing out there? We're in it for the long haul, so I hope you've been able to take some time to take care of your bodies and take some time for yourself. This week we are hanging out with a beautiful soul from Birmingham, Alabama. This is Voice Porter, an artist through and through. It really comes through him in whatever medium he's working with at the moment, but many people know him as a poet and a visual artist, especially as a muralist. Voice grew up in Ensley, Alabama, which over the last couple decades became synonymous with high rates of violence and poverty and crime. Voice went to high school there. He grew up there. He knows the people that are the heart and soul of the community there. And he, along with several others, is part of a decentralized collective called Ensley Alive, which is now devoted to and has been very successful in the renaissance of Ensley, both in bringing resources, art, mental health tools to the area, and also really changing the way that it is perceived at large. A big part of that has been through the Color Project, which brings murals and outdoor spaces, including community gardens, to Ensley. And really, as you'll hear, involves the people in the neighborhood in the creation of the art. And I think right now, as we do the work of reimagining our world and our communities, it's really important that we hear from people that have been living in communities that have been absolutely devastated by systemic racism, and that outsiders don't just re-import the same models into those areas that created the trauma in the first place. There have been people in these communities loving one another, supporting one another in deeply innovative ways, being so in service to one another because they didn't have a choice and it was the only way to survive and thrive. And I think the greater collective has a responsibility to honor and uplift the people that have been doing that work unseen largely for decades, centuries in some cases, and use that as the starting point. Voice is part of a lineage that I feel deeply indebted to in my own life, which is, of course, the medicine of art making. Some of my most influential teachers, including James Baldwin and Toni Morrison, have spoken about how integral the role of the artist is in these times, to have the power of reimagining, to be the conduits of possibility. And Voice is really living that example in such a powerful way. He's been really successful in not just transforming the way that Ensley is understood, but transforming the fabric of that community and bringing dignity to the people that live there every day. And I mean, what else are we doing here? As we learn what it means to invest in one another and divest from the institutions and systems that have made so many parts of this country, of American communities, just really difficult places to live and raise families and find healthy food. It should not be that way. And to blame the people that live in those communities is just another symptom of racism and how deeply we've bought into the story that the state is here to protect and sustain us. It's just not true for so many of us, especially people of color and Indigenous people. And the more I learn about the radical care and love that has just been ablaze in these communities from the beginning of time, I'm really humbled to be able to sit and talk to people that have been carrying that lineage and embodying it. I'm really honored that Voice sat down to share his experience with all of us. I'm really glad you're here too, and that you all continue to be open to hearing and speaking the truth, even when it can be heartbreaking and uncomfortable. It's the way through. It really is. And I honor that courage and transparency. So here is Voice Porter, poet, painter, master gardener, teacher.
I can start by reading something.
Oh, wonderful.
Do you mind if I read 2 things?
Please.
Okay. I just have to locate this second. Oh, here we are. So in response to the times we're living in right now, I've been working on a collection of poems called the Trauma Sutra. And it is essentially about how trauma connects us in ways that most anything else cannot. But that being connected by trauma is often not a good thing. Yeah. So the first poem is called Trauma Sutra. No needle can pump your heart faster. No powder can elevate you as high. No flower from a tree that never makes it past sapling can draw you deeper into your own core. No liquid can drown your inhibitions so quickly. No pills will make you want to touch another person as badly as trauma. And the second one is about things that my father, his father, my mother's father, and my great uncle have told me in that order. What does it mean to be black in America? Dwayne Benjamin told me that a white man will cut off his nose to spite his face. Oliver Van told me that if I fell off a cliff and grabbed onto a white man's hand, he would sever his limb to let me fall. Joe Louis told me if a white man stand in my way, know that a closed mouth don't get fed, but a closed fist makes declarations.
Thank you. Yeah, what has this current moment been like for you?
It has been rejuvenating and completely tiring. And so just watching people from literally all over the world, 18, 20 countries around the world, and all 50 states taken to the street to say that I matter, right? It's been just, a joy to watch. It's been a joy to watch. But having lived this fight all my life and having my parents who lived this fight and their parents and on and on and on, and knowing that even as much noise is being made right now and as much change that is being affected right now, there will still be this fight for generations. That's tiring. I had a chance to sit at the feet of Dr. Sonia Sanchez a few years ago. And she said to us that if she had known that the revolution would have taken as long as it's taking, she would have taken a lot more vacations. At the time, I was like, no, you can't take a day off from revolution. But I also understand that if you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anybody else. So sometimes self-care is the best care.
It's also radical in the face of systems or, the state that doesn't take care.
Yeah, I've been, over the last year or so, at least until the pandemic hit, I've been giving these talks and workshops about what revolution looks like, about using art to process racial trauma and racial terror. And one of the things that I've talked about is how revolutionary it is to care for yourself and care for the people around you and to show love to people around you. And I often cite that there were some understandings. Have you ever heard of the Black Codes?
I don't think so.
So along with Jim Crow, which was law, like on books or statutes and stuff like that, there was a writer called the Black Codes, which was unwritten laws, things that everybody knew that you could or could not do, that were not necessarily written in anybody's law books. But if you were caught doing or not doing as a black person, you could be punished. And one of those things was showing public affection. Public displays of affection between black couples was expressly forbidden, and you could essentially lose your life for that. Another thing is showing intimacy to a white person, especially a black man to a white woman. And one of the things that I found out through the Black Codes that was an intimate thing is lighting someone else's cigarette.
Oof.
I don't think we have time to dig into that right now. I have been talking about for the last year or so and living my life like this for more than that before I really pulled it together to have these discussions and these workshops about it. How revolutionary it is to publicly love on people, to hug people, to, shake hands, and not a quick, just how you doing, let it go, but a shake hand, one hand on the inside, one hand on the outside, to look people in the eyes and really, really ask them how they're feeling and wait for a response instead of the, how you doing? Oh, I'm fine. All right. And then you keep going. Like, actually loving on people in public is a revolutionary thing, because for so long, those things have been against the law, really against the law. Like, people could get hurt just for showing love. Loving, I think, out loud is the most revolutionary thing we can do. It is not kind of a backseat thing. Like, it is one of the things we should do up front. Now, I don't want to be misunderstood. I do believe that protest is the most direct action thing that we can do to affect change. Real protest is the most direct action thing we can do to affect change on a policy level. But just because you change policy doesn't mean you change people's hearts. And so I think there has to be a combination of us loving each other out loud, right in public, lighting people's cigarettes, as it may be, and protesting, using our voice.
It's interesting that you talking about the Black Codes and then your poem about trauma. Sometimes I have sort of a surreal feeling of like, how did we get to this point of such heightened fear against each other? But it's not confusing. Like, it's all in there. We're in the lineage, like, we've been deeply conditioned to be terrified by each other, and it's not that long ago. It's not that surprising that we still feel that, even if there's not a Black Code that we're consciously aware of anymore.
You're right. It's not that long ago. It's not that long ago at all. So my father grew up through Jim Crow segregation. So I'm not far removed from it at all. So I, growing up as a kid in the 90s and such, he would often tell me how to act, what to do, what not to do. If there's, you're going to a place with a bunch of white people, like, you do these things. And I'm like, but why? Like, I don't understand. Like, nobody's making me have to do anything. Like, and so I didn't quite get it until, later, my teenage years as such, that even though policy had changed, a lot of hearts had not. And people were not willing to be as visible with their fear and their hatred, but it was still there. And then I came to realize that I believe a lot of fear is fear of repercussions, fear of Black people deciding that we're going to take the lessons we've learned, take the lumps we've gotten, and return those lumps. But I don't believe that is the truth. Like, it's everybody I know really just wants to live. Like, we just want to live. It's like, just leave me alone, let me do my thing, and whatever, right? Mm-hmm. But I think that fear that one day Black people are going to wake up and just burn the country down is really rampant.
Which must mean that people are realizing what we've put Black people through. You know, there must be a conscious awareness if there is that fear.
I believe there is a conscious awareness of that, because there's that fear. The psychologist Jane Elliott did an experiment where she had a room full of white people, and she talked about racism, and a lot of them just refused to believe that racism even existed, and that even if it did, there were just a few people, and that they were all very good people in the room. And she asked them a simple thing. She asked them to raise their hand if they would like to be treated the way that Black people are treated in America. Mm. And nobody raised their hand, which means everybody knew, but they tried to pretend they didn't. Mm-hmm. And so I think we're getting to a point now where the veil is off, and there's willful ignorance is showing itself. Mm-hmm. Right? And some people who have been willfully ignorant for a long time have decided, I can't be this ignorant anymore. Like, there's no way with everything that's happening that I can pretend any longer that these things are not happening. And so I think that's a wonderful step forward for the world, actually, not just Black people, because I think any social justice, any civil justice that happens and pushes forward large groups of folks helps everybody. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which makes me want to dig into that piece that you talked about art as revolution, mm-hmm. and how that came into or through you in your life.
I believe my first understanding of art as revolution was when I was 11 years old, and I started working with the Birmingham Museum of Art to paint murals. I have a cousin, Sherman Benton, who was I believe to be the greatest artist on the planet when we were children. And I still believe that he is one of the most creative people that I've ever come across. He's just, I wish I could just take him with me everywhere. But he got involved with the education department at the Museum of Art through his art teacher at his elementary school. Like, he was just, this prodigy, and everybody was like, this guy is amazing, this little kid. And they would like take him everywhere and show him off and take him to art galleries, and he would make things and everybody would buy them. And so he was like the richest kid I knew. And so one day they decided they would paint a mural inside of an elementary school. And Sherman said he needed help. And the people at the museum were like, well, you've got these two adults with you, and they're going to be painting. They're going to help. He's like, no, I need somebody else. And so they were like, oh, we can get someone else from the museum. He's like, no, I know somebody. And so it took him like a week and a half to convince me to come in my summer vacation to a museum at 7:00 in the morning. Mm-hmm. So he got me to come to paint, and I had no idea what I was doing. I don't think I had painted anything since finger paints in like elementary school. And my drawing was like really good stick figures. But he was very, very supportive. And he just knew that once I got involved, I could do it. Mm-hmm. And he was right. Like, the first time we painted something, my little section of the wall was horrible. Right? And so he would spend time coming over every now and then to correct things that I had done wrong. Mm-hmm. And after a few more of those murals, I started to get better. I started to see myself get better. Mm-hmm. Maybe the second or the third one was when I started to understand revolution through art. The first part of revolution was giving someone a chance to do something that they may not have otherwise had a chance to do because of whatever situations they're in. And so because my cousin thought enough of me to bring me with him, and his confidence in me made the people in charge have confidence in me. Right? Even though I didn't know what I was doing, they were confident in my cousin enough to believe in me. And so that got me into a space that I would have never gotten into by myself. I would never have even attempted to go to the museum by myself, let alone bust into the education department and say, I want to do art, give me art supplies. Like, that would not have been a thing. And then secondarily, the thing that really flipped the switch for me is we started going to community centers in neighborhoods across Birmingham. And instead of just showing up there with our paints and stuff and then painting the murals as we done the first mural or two, we went inside and Sherman and I played basketball in the gym with the other kids, and the adults talked to people in charge there. And then we'd leave and come back the next day with our supplies and stuff. And there would be a group of children around our age ready to paint. And so it would be our job to block off the spaces, and they kind of fill in spaces. And then Sherman and I would come back and we would do detail along with the adult artist that was with us. And it was then I started to understand that when you gather people and when people are able to express themselves through art, a lot of things change. And so a lot of the walls we painted had graffiti all over them. And some of the people in the neighborhood were like, I don't know why you're doing that. They just going to paint over next week. As a 11, 12, 13-year-old, I was like, I don't know what you're going to do when I leave, but I'm just here to paint. I'm having fun. This is my summer vacation. This is the best thing that I've ever been signed up for. I'm doing this. But I've gone back to some of those murals, and the only thing that have affected them is time. They're faded, but they're not painted over. There's no graffiti on them. No one has damaged them. And it's because the people in the communities, the children in the communities who are now adults, painted them. Like, this was their work, and they were not going to allow anybody else to do anything to their work. This was a source of pride for everyone who put a brush to the wall, and all their parents and all their friends and their relatives who came to our unveilings and saw it and took pictures with them. So those are my first introductions to using art as a revolutionary tool.
Gives me goosebumps. I feel like I see the intersection with trauma there too, because there's the one-on-one relationship of having resources and tools to create things like unlocking or just welcoming us to explore, I think, the nonverbal parts of ourselves that hold a lot of traumatic experience. So there's just the individual catharsis, but then also the way that you talk about it transforming a community is like, yeah, that's such a sacred thing. Wow.
Which is why with the Color Project, the way we introduce public art into a space is much different from the way that people are doing it in other places. In a lot of places, an artist will come and say, I want to paint a thing on your building, and the building owner says, fine, go for it. Or the building owner will say, I want a thing, and they'll find a company or an artist to do it. Here's the money for supplies, go get it done or whatever, with little to no regard for the community that the mural is in or that the artwork will be in. It's beautiful artwork. Like, the artists are always amazing, but it never really speaks to the heart and soul of the people or the neighborhood that it's in. And with the Color Project, we take a lot of time to knock on doors, send out surveys, stand at bus stops. We talk to a lot of people and we ask a lot of questions. We ask people to describe for us how they feel about spaces and situations and their lives in the neighborhood that we're in. And then we take that information, and the artist goes through this deepening treasure trove of information, because every time we do one, we get more people's voices involved. And so there's much more for an artist to pull from. And so I like to say that we talk to all the people who live, work, and play in whatever neighborhood it might be. And that definitely helps in creating things that people in the space will definitely take stake in. and say, this is ours. Even if they didn't put a brush on the building, right? This is ours. I can look at this and I can feel the thing. Like I understand this story, as opposed to it's just art, right? Just art for art's sake, which is cool. And some of that is needed. But when you are in neighborhoods that have been neglected for many years, the people have been neglected for so long, you have to start with their story. We have to start in a space that feels good to the folks who already live there.
I feel like that approach needs to be extrapolated to every part of like the food, the education, the policing. We have such a paternalistic approach to neglected neighborhoods. I feel like outsiders are like, oh, y'all can't handle yourselves, so here's what we're going to do, rather than being like, the people know what they need. They live there every day. They have vision. They've just been stripped of any resources to execute it.
That is a statement. I don't even know what to say about that statement. So that is such a true statement. A lot of people talk about, when we talk about food, people talk about food or the lack of it in places as food deserts. I don't use that term. As far as we know, deserts are naturally occurring things. Right? And what's happening in our neighborhoods has not been naturally occurring. It is an apartheid. These are food apartheids. People are living in neighborhoods where there once was stuff. Those things were purposefully taken out. That is not a desert, right? That was purposefully done. I think we also have to chill out on using language that allows people to escape.
What do you mean?
When you use language like a food desert, it sounds like something that just kind of happened. Oh, it's a food desert. But when you use the language of what it actually is, it makes people really uncomfortable. Right? Oh, it's a food apartheid. That is much more uncomfortable for people to hear. But it's so much more accurate. Like now, with all of the things that are going on, people in the street in concern to Black Lives Mattering, that was a very uncomfortable statement for a lot of people to just simply acknowledge that the lives of Black people mattered. But that was a thing that had to be said. Calling people slaves has to stop. Because when you're calling people a slave, you are essentially saying that is their natural state of being instead of being enslaved. That is a whole different thing. When someone is enslaved, you understand that they didn't sign up for this. They didn't show up and go, hey, I heard that you guys are taking people to do some work. I really want to do some work. Like that is not a thing that happened. And so calling people slaves has to be chopped off, and we have to call people what it was. Like this was slavery and people were enslaved. And so just the verbiage around a lot of our lives has to change. We cannot continue using what people call the language of the oppressor and believe that things will change. It is exactly the way that our laws are made up. Like the way we put words together really means something. Like just a very small change in something. Like the Constitution of the United States of America is different from the Constitution for the United States of America.
Can you unpack that?
When something is of a thing, if I have a Constitution of the United States of America, that means that the United States of America, the people themselves, are a part of this pact. We have made this thing. We, the people, have made this thing. But a Constitution for the United States of America means somebody else has created it and imposed it upon them. But at first read or listen or whatever, most people would not get the difference. And that is why the language is so important, because someone can do that and put the for in instead of, and everything changes and you don't know why. Right? And this happens in everyday life. This happens in creating laws. This happens in creating social contracts. What you're saying and how you're saying are equally important.
And it really shapes our perception of the world and our place in it. I mean, I guess language does create the world in a way, but yeah, you're making me realize how important that is for, the internal liberation work as much as the external.
Exactly. Being able to hear, read things, see things that are worded properly, worded in the proper context, and worded in a way that does not allow for people who are wanting to do awful things to escape. Like that is where we have to go. That's why language is so important. I think language is both one of the best things that humans have created, and also probably the biggest barrier to real communication. And here I am, a person of language. Like, I'm a poet and a writer. And so I have to be very careful when I write things or when I speak in front of people to not say something that will allow people to not be present or not be responsible in their own bodies for whatever we're talking about. It doesn't matter. It could just be we're trying to get an order together, for, a pizza place or whatever, but we've got to get our language together and do it properly and do it right so that we can all hold each other accountable and progress.
I feel that tension sometimes as a creative person in general, of being like, well, I think humans are designed to express and grapple with the human incarnation and experience through, the magic that we have, which is that we can make things and build things and take ideas and bring them into this shared reality. But I also feel so hesitant sometimes of the artifice quality of the art and being like, it's inherently representation and not the real deal. So it feels sometimes like a responsibility, I guess, like you're saying, to wield it well, to wield it for connection and not for division.
Yes, all of that. I feel like I'm in an improv show right now. Yes, and building art for connection is paramount. It is probably the most important thing that an artist can do. Two things that tie for second is making art for art's sake that can be shared. Just because sometimes people just need to see beauty or anguish or whatever it is that you put into your art. People just need to see it, and it doesn't have to be directed towards any person or group of people. It just exists. And the other thing that ties for second is I think and sometimes artists do need to make art specifically for division. Really? Yes. Because sometimes you need to know where people stand. This time that we're living in now, we're finding out where a lot of people stand. We're finding there are a lot of people who have been showing, smiles in public, but daggers in private are now being exposed. And we're finding that people who didn't think they had a stance, thought that none of this really affected them, are realizing that it really affects them tremendously. And sometimes you need to have something that sparks a division so that the actual conversation can be had. So if everybody is basically saying either something's wrong or I don't see anything wrong, then there can't really be a conversation. But if one side is saying there's something wrong and you split in another side saying we know but we don't care, then you can have the conversation is going to be rough. It's going to be rough. And historically, human history has told us that these conversations are rough and often violent. But once they're had, there is great progress to be had on the other side. And so we need to have that sometimes. So we need to have this art that speaks directly to massive groups of people to bring us together. But we also need to have that art that divides us so that we know where we stand and we can start to correct it.
Does your work exist on that continuum? I know you said before we started recording that some people think you're militant.
It does. It exists on that continuum. It just like a singular poem can exist in both of those worlds, because some people will read it and go, you're just so militant and you sound so angry. And personally, I'll go, but I don't think I was even angry when I read it, when I wrote it. Like, it doesn't sound angry to me. Like, I guess that's how you feel about it. So maybe you should look inside yourself and try to figure out why you think I'm angry about the thing I'm talking about. That's some self-work that should be done. We need to be dividing and pulling people together and dividing people together until we can all truly say that we're all pulled together in the same space, that we're all pulled together on the same understanding. Otherwise, we'll just get a bunch of people pretending like they don't know what's going on.
Oof, yeah. So I get the sense that some of your work in Ensley has been a kind of like the shift that you're talking about with language. I feel like, is it true that you've done that a bit with the way that Ensley is kind of perceived? Like if Ensley is a meme, almost like changing the associations with that about how it's talked about and how it's understood in the greater context of Birmingham, maybe from within.
I do. Like that is my short answer. Yes, I feel like that. The longer answer is that a lot has changed. A lot. Ensley Alive is not an organization. There's no hierarchy, president, vice president, things like that. Ensley Alive is a movement made of collectively of individuals and organizations who want to push forward the Renaissance in Ensley. And what we do is we come together periodically, and whoever has a thing happening will say, I need help doing X, Y, Z, A, B, C. And the other people will say, I or my organization can do this thing for you. And we just offer each other help. Like we lean on each other. Like there's no, you did a project last week and you're doing another one this week. You already got my help for the month. Like that's not how it works, right? Because we understand that every project pushes forward the health and well-being of the people in Ensley. And so every project is as important as the last project. And everybody who is involved gives whatever help they can. And when people can't, it's like if someone feels like they're overtaxed, overburdened, whatever, we just say that. And so we just lean on each other. And I think a lot of people have not figured that out in other neighborhoods across the country, where organizations don't really work with each other. Organizations will go, well, I can do that thing for you, but it's going to cost you. Instead of, let me look at my budget. Okay, I can't do 100 of them, but I can do 20. So yeah, so that collective work is how things get done, and also how the narrative of Ensley has changed. Because when I was growing up in Ensley and went to Ensley High School, Ensley had already garnered a bad reputation. I didn't see as much of the bad stuff happening as people said was happening. Right?
Are you talking violence?
Yeah, I'm talking violence. I'm talking, robberies. I'm talking all kinds of stuff. I would see on the news all the time that horrible things were happening in Ensley. And I would be like, I don't hear these according to the news, like there's gun battle every night. I don't hear these things. I don't see them when I go to school. I don't hear my peers talking about them like nobody else saw them. Right? And so what I found out in my adult life when I started working in Ensley is that a vast portion of the west side of Birmingham used to be the city of Ensley before it was annexed into Birmingham over 100 years ago. But all the street signs still say ENS. So Birmingham is made of 99 neighborhoods grouped into 23 communities. Even if you're 2 communities away, the street signs still say ENS. Ensley's only 6 neighborhoods, but anything that happens in the other 19 neighborhoods that used to be the city of Ensley gets reported by the media as Ensley.
So it's just a catch-all for any
And so it's
bad
just a
stuff.
catch-all for all of the west side of Birmingham. Like every neighborhood over there is Ensley. And so when I started working in Ensley, people would not come there. Like I want to have meetings with people who's like, we need to talk to you. We want to do this thing. You guys have resources and funding, and we want to show you the grand vision. You should come out here and see it. And they'll go, that's kind of far, though. Ensley is literally about 7 minutes from downtown. That's kind of far. How about we meet halfway in a gentrified neighborhood or, a place like that? But a few years ago, it started to change. And before I even asked, they would say, should I just come to your office? I would really love to see these murals that you've done. I would really love to see this garden that you've put together. I would love to see these things. And so the perception of the space has started to change drastically. And it's not just because of the murals that we put up. It is because of the business owners who, if they were in any other part of the city, would have just gone out of business from not having enough customers, but who have stuck in there, taken reduced pay to be there, to show some consistency for this space. And people are starting to say more and more every day, we should check out what's going on in Ensley. And that has been a real collective effort.
As you're talking, I feel like I have a little bit of like maybe it's a cynical perspective coming out of New York, but I'm just like, does that mean that gentrifiers are going to be on their way to like come extract the magic that's happening there? Is there a way to protect it?
Yes, that means that gentrifiers are on the way. Gentrifiers have been attempting to gain a foothold in the Ensley business district for years. But the vast majority of the buildings and the businesses in Ensley are owned by Black people. And there has been some probably unspoken understanding that, we live in a city of Birmingham, which, depending on which statistics you look at, is between 74 and 82% African American. But you couldn't really tell that by being in downtown or South Side or Avondale, even Woodlawn now. Like, the city looks like, in all the places that where all the businesses are, it looks like a white city with a few Black people. But it is really a Black city with about 11% white people.
What's creating that sense? Is that because it's so segregated still?
Systemic racism is the most comprehensive way I can explain this. Banks not giving loans, people not wanting to have business dealings with certain people. Just, all kinds of things have kept Black people out of business in Birmingham and out of large business in the downtown corridors. And so Ensley is kind of one of the last bastions. I can go to other cities across this country and I can say something akin to, so, where do the Black people hang out? Like, where do Black people? And someone will take me to a section of the city where there are thriving businesses and bakeries and restaurants and bars and all kinds of stuff. But in Birmingham, though this is the fourth blackest city in the nation, there's no space like that. This is where people think I'm so militant, right? They hear me say these kind of things, and they're like, that's racist. You just want Black people to be with Black people and stuff like that. But I understand that every community of people takes care of their own community of people. And if you have a community of people that has been locked out of being able to take care of itself for so long, then yes, I would love to see Black neighborhoods and business districts thrive in a place where there are so many of us. It just seems wrong to not have it. Right? It just seems very wrong to not have it.
So I wonder from what you've seen in Ensley, if you have kind of a sense for, in this collective moment as we seem to be reevaluating how we structure communities and where we put resources, do you have some takeaways or kernels of like where neglected neighborhoods like Ensley was could most use an injection, or what the first steps are to really, what was the word you used? Renaissance, to really create a renaissance?
I don't like to use the word revive. People like to say, we're reviving a thing. And when you revive something, that essentially means it's dead. And Ensley has never been dead. We've just been neglected. It's a big difference. People who are on the ground can really just continue doing what they're doing, whatever it is you're doing in the neighborhood. I know of a woman who has an organization where she gets prom dresses and gives them to the girls in a neighborhood so they can attend proms and formal ceremonies and things like that because they can't afford them. And she gives them away. Like, it's not they're discounted. It's like, no, she gives them to the people. So everybody who's doing the thing that you are doing, like, do the thing you do as well as you possibly can. For people on the outside who want to help, don't formulate a plan. Find the people on the inside who are already doing a thing and put your weight behind them. If you have financial help that you can give, find organizations that are doing something that, you know, speaks to your heart. Put the finances there. There's no need for you to create another organization to use your finances to take your will into a space. Just put the finances into the space that's there, and without a trillion stipulations that essentially makes the people do the thing that you want them to do. Right? Let them do what they're doing, but be able to do it better. Find organizations that are working, or even just people that are working, because a lot of the organizations in places like Ensley, all over the country, aren't organizations. They're just single people busting their butts to make their communities better. There's a woman who allows children to come to her house after school. She gives them tutoring. She feeds them. She takes care of these kids from the time they get out of school until about 7 o'clock in the evening before they go home. Their parents might have been at work or what have you. And then when their parents get off work, they know where to find their kids, right? She doesn't get paid for that.
Wow.
At all. She does not get paid for that.
Wow.
At all.
She just saw a need and said,
She
come
saw
here.
a need and filled it. And there are tons and tons of people doing these kind of things. And if you have resources, like, you know, where you can get food, find somebody who's feeding people and get them the food. If you know you can get clothes and you know somebody who's clothing people, get them the clothes. Right? Just get the money and the resources to the people who are already doing the work.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah. I feel like capitalism is just such a, like, it permeates everything we're talking about. And when I was reading about the garden that you have, I was really struck by what a service that is to create a space where people are interacting and it has nothing to do with buying something. And yeah, I'm curious how you became a master gardener and where that fits into this.
So this whole life of mine has been, I think, moving me in one direction since I was born. I was working out of the Norwood Resource Center. You know, shout out to Melody Eccles, who gave me a shot there. Melody and her team, just before I came on board, came with the idea of running a market to get produce into this place that was suffering from food apartheid. So we talked about this much more, and then we were like, you know, maybe we should also grow food. So that was the conversation for a while. So we found 3 other people who lived in the community to go through the Master Gardener training. We applied for the Community Health Innovation Award to start our gardens. We got the money, and we created 4 gardens in Norwood and called them the Norwood Learning Gardens. Literally hundreds of volunteers over the course of so many days helping us put these gardens together. We have the garden beds for families. Like, a family could come, pay $10 for the year, and have access to this bed. They can get some seeds from us. Water was provided by us. Tools are in the shed. You just show up. You show up, tend your stuff. That's all you gotta do, right? Well, you know, maybe mow a little grass every now and then. Help us keep the garden looking nice. But that was the first one I was involved with, and I saw the power of that. Having neighbors come out and interact with each other who may not have necessarily even known that they lived in the same neighborhood with each other.
Cool.
Right? That was a thing. So when I moved over to start working in Ensley, I took that concept with me, and I had 2 12-foot long garden beds right up against the sidewalk next to the road, where I planted just a free garden, just whatever I had left over. If I was planting tomatoes and I got a couple of tomato plants that don't fit in the bed, I stick them in that bed, right? If I got zucchini, I stick them in there. If I got some spinach, I stick it in there. And it's meant for people to take. It's meant for, if you're just walking by and you see a tomato and it's good and red and you want it, you have it, all right? And I do that so that people don't have to feel guilty about they don't feel like they're stealing anything. Like it's right on the sidewalk. There are signs that say, this bed belongs to the Smiths, and this bed belongs, but these two beds here don't have any signs, and they're right there on the edge. And people will come by plenty of times looking, and I'll always say to everybody who comes by, if you see anything in these beds you want, just get it, take it out, right? Take it with you. We've got collard greens that have been growing over there in the giveaway bed, and people come over there and harvest them, and they harvest them properly. Like they take the ones from around the bottom and they let the top continue growing, and so everybody gets to share in it. Like it's a beautiful thing.
I feel like that's love, pretty much, growing things and then saying whoever needs food can eat. I mean, that's the most basic offering to make.
I think so. Yeah, helping to keep people alive and healthy. I mean, with no pretense. Like, there's no donation box, so people don't have to feel a certain way about it. And if you want or need more than the few things that are in these boxes, come talk to us about getting a plot. Some people say it's just $10 a year. Some people really can't afford $10 a year. And so, people can grow. People can grow. Just need to come and say, I would like to grow, and commit to growing in all the growing seasons. Have something in your box.
Do you feel a spiritual mandate to do this work, or was there a person, an adult growing up that kind of led you in this path of service?
I believe that it is a familial thing. So yes, I think it's a spiritual mandate to do this work. All of the things that I do, I can point back at them and say, these are things that they did. And it may not have been a thing that I really paid attention to or, even thought I wanted to do. But I found myself in these spaces, like my grandfather's garden. More than half the stuff we ate at home was from his garden. And he gave away a bunch of stuff. Now, we could probably have eaten nothing but things in his garden. But he gave away, he traded stuff too. Like he bartered with his food. And so I thought I had discovered kale when when I got to be an adult, and I was telling my grandmother about it. And she was like, your granddaddy got kale out in the garden right now. I was like, what? She's like, you've been eating kale your whole life. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, look at that. So he would, take big bunches of kale and spinach and stuff and go out to some people he knew by a lake and trade with them and come home with fish. And so we would, that was always a thing. Like, whatever you have in abundance, give it to someone else or trade it with someone else for a thing that they have in abundance. They can't use all that, right? But they can use some of your thing and you can use some of their thing. And some people just don't have anything, and so you just give them the thing. Like, there was plenty of times we had these massive pecan trees. We had what I call a pecan grove. My granddad said it's just a few trees, but there were 11 of them. It's a grove, right? He was like, just a few pecan trees. That at any given time during pecan season, there would just be people I had never seen in my life out in our backyard picking pecans.
Wow.
Like, just out there doing it. That's just kind of the way it has always been for me. With my mother, there was always another person or family living in our house. Right? She had space. We really didn't have space. We really didn't have space. Like, we had people on couches. We had people who made, space on floor. Me and my two brothers, like 3 of us are sleeping in one bed because somebody else sleeping in the other beds. But she was always like, I have a roof over my head. I have food in my pantry. And these people do not. They can share in it, and we can help them get to a space where they can then have roof over their head and food in their pantries. And even today, there are organizations all across the metro area who give away food. Right? You go, you get a box of food or a bag of food or whatever, but you kind of got to go and stand in line, and you got to sign up, and you got to wait and wait and wait. And my mom goes to all these places. She does not need this food. She goes to all these places, gets this food, and then takes it to the people in the neighborhood who can't get out.
Wow.
Right? And whatever's left over, she puts it in boxes on the curb right in front of her house, and the people who walk through the neighborhood just come by and pick it up. That's just who we are. That's just a thing that we've always done. I haven't known anything else but that. Like I don't think I would feel good in my spirit if everything I did was just for me.
Makes me want to cry because just think about how much noise and content and media there is out there about all this other bullshit. And then there are people like your mom that are making sure people eat every day. It's like, I want to elevate that. Let's talk about that. Let's value that.
This woman is supreme. So her house burned up in November. And she had no insurance on the house. In the midst of us trying to secure funds and stuff, which takes a while apparently. We got into this year, pandemic, and so all things have ceased on outside agencies wanting to help because agency help is going to other places now. Right? So she has almost single-handedly done the demolition inside of her house.
What?
All right. Like she'll call me and she'll say, I need you to come today because we're doing X, Y, and Z. And I was like, okay. And I'll go and I'll show up and I'll go, what happened to the wall that was over there 3 days ago when I was here?
Wow.
Well, I took that out yesterday. I was like, Mama, you got it. You can't do this by yourself. You got to stop. But she has not stopped. She has not stopped. And so my brothers and I, as much as we possibly can, like we just show up over there because we know she's there. I wake up in the morning and if I don't have things on my schedule, I'm trying to be out the door by 7 a.m. to be over there because I know when I get there at 7:30, 8 o'clock, whatever time, she's already been there for an hour or two. Like I already know this. So yeah, she's been doing the demolition mostly by herself. And we're just kind of step by step putting this place back together. And I believe it's going to be much better than it was before it burned.
Cool.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I wanted to ask you what it's like to raise little boys these days in this world.
It's difficult.
Yeah.
Like the boys are fine. Like that's the easy part. It's the world that's difficult. It's very difficult. It's very heartbreaking to have to explain to your little brown boys why their beautiful brown skin is a target for everybody, including other brown people. It's very difficult to know that my boys have left the house to go herping. So herpetology is the study of reptiles and stuff. So my boys go herping. They're looking for snakes and lizards all the time. To know that they've left the house to go herping, I worry about them. Like I try not to let them see me worry, right? But they leave the house and they're only going like the place we live in. We have relatives like every few houses or so, and they're only going a couple of blocks up the street on a street that probably has 5 cars an hour. But man, like if they're gone and I know they're gone and I hear police sirens, like it is a very difficult thing. Like it is very difficult. It was extremely trying to tell my boys about the rioting that happened in downtown Birmingham because they were very worried that people were hurt. And I had to assure them that people weren't being hurt, that property was being damaged. And there's a difference. But they were still very worried about and the older one shed a lot of tears. The rioting happened on my birthday. Or the night before. So the next day I was supposed to take my boys into like the South Side and you'll go hang out for my birthday or whatever. And I was telling them about this stuff. So I said, you want to just ride through downtown so you can see. And so the very next day after that night of riding, the very next day we went through downtown, and a lot of the places that I had seen watching on Facebook Live and stuff like that had windows busted out, windows were already repaired and all the glass had been swept away. Right? There was no glass on the streets. Windows were repaired or had boards on them. And I showed him that. And he felt better about it. But then he still did not approve of people breaking buildings And so then there was another difficult talk about how sometimes in order to be heard, you have to get people's attention. And just talking to them does not work. When conversation has broken down and yelling does not work. Sometimes if you throw a brick, then people go, wait, what? He says he understands, but he still doesn't like it. Raising children is, it's beautiful and it's fun and it's exciting. I get to learn a lot of things. When they learn a lot of things, they get to teach me things that I already knew. That's always fun too. Did you know? Blah, blah, blah. Really? Yeah. But, there is that scary side because they are little brown boys. And at what point do my cute, adorable brown boys become a threat to somebody? What point do they stop being cute and adorable and start looking like a thug? At what point do they have their music up too loud and somebody doesn't like it? Or they're walking in a space where somebody doesn't think they should be? That's difficult. It's very difficult.
Yeah, I honor you walking that path with them and preparing them to be in the world, but also to be free within themselves. That's big work for all of us, but especially for parents.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm sure I'll get through it. My parents got through it. Their parents got through it. My grandmother would often say, it is amazing how much you can get done when it has to be done. It's amazing what you can get done when it has to. And that is, I think, the summation of the struggle of Black people in America. A lot of people ask me often, how do you do it? Well, I have no other choice. I can't just pretend that nothing is happening. I can't just, pack up and go somewhere else, because this spirit of a thing has permeated the entire globe, which is why the globe is in upheaval right now. It's why everybody's in the streets marching right now all over the place. There's no escaping it. And so I have to persevere. I have to be, I guess, what people call strong. It's not a choice. I didn't just wake up one day and go, I'm going to be amazing and a Superman. No. These things are kind of thrust upon you, and you do it or you perish.
It's high stakes. Yeah.
Yep. It's like playing a roulette game every day of your life. It's a big gamble. Just walking out the door sometimes.
Do you feel in touch with that on a day-to-day basis?
Oh, yeah. My Blackness. Most days, I don't consciously think about myself and my situation, but almost every day I'm reminded of it in some way. Like something I watch on television, something that I've seen in memes, or some video on the internet, something I've read, interactions with people in public. That's a real thing. That's one of the things about raising the boys that has infuriated me some. There have been a number of times we've shown up to a park and there are little kids playing. My boys show up and run out there and play, and then all the parents gather their children and go.
Wow.
Number of times. I can't even explain to you how many times that's happened. Just a couple days ago, we were at the river, Locust Fork of the Black Warrior River, and I was laying out on a blanket. My boys are in the water, and this truck came down the hill and stopped. And he just sat there for a minute. This truck full of people. They sat there for a second. And then he backed up, turned around, and went back up the hill. And I was like, oh, man, the power of racism. Thanks. Now, we don't have to be here with you.
Right.
Thank you very much, because there would have been tension. Just going about your business. Just don't even show up. And when I said that, I literally said that out loud. And my son answered, "What'd you say?" From out in the river. Huh? It's like, and I was like, man, like, I really felt thankful that people saw me and my brown skin and decided not to come to where I was. Especially because of all the craziness that's happening and all the upheaval that's going on and the tension that's being created between people. That needs to happen because we gotta have the conversations. We gotta address it. But I felt relieved that time, and probably because my boys didn't see it. But at the parks, when they show up and the kids get spirited away, they see that and they ask questions.
So embarrassing. It's so, yeah. Oh, we have so far to go.
We got a ways to go. I think as long as we're still moving, we're okay. I guess. Who knows? Who knows? This world history has been a lot of forward progression and backwards moving for as long as world history has existed. And so we had some forward progression for a while, and then we got some backwards moving. 3, 4, 5 years from now, we will be in a much better place than we are now, but still with a lot of work to be done.
Well, last question. Do you have any perspective for artists who are feeling like they want to be part of something bigger and meaningful, but aren't sure necessarily what that means as an artist?
Make art. Make it however you feel. Like, don't try to temper your feelings. Don't try to suppress emotions. Don't live with emotions forever either. Like, if you're angry, don't live with the anger forever. Use the anger. Create something. Create some things, plural. Like, use that anger, put it into the art, and then let people see it. Don't keep it. Don't go, "Oh, I was angry." Because a lot of people I know, artists I know, don't want people to see the things that they've done when they were angry. They don't want people to see, "Oh, you don't want to read this. I was depressed when I wrote that." Like, no, those are the things that people need to see. They need to read. They need to hear this music that you created. They need to be able to, touch these sculptures that you've made in your anger, in your depression, in your sadness, in your joy, in whatever that you're feeling because of the thing that you're going through or the thing that we're all going through. I am a real big believer that nothing on this planet changes, grows, evolves without art. Nothing. And I think the proof is that we have art shoved into our faces every day that we don't recognize as art. Marketing, advertisements, the color schemes inside of big box chain stores, like all of these are artistic interpretations of a thing to design to get you to feel a certain way, purposefully designed to make you feel a certain way. And so art affects us on such a deep level, and most of us don't really realize that we're being affected by art, because I think a lot of people try to separate art and design. Yeah, they're really one and the same. If you are a great designer, that means you are a fantastic artist who absolutely knows what to put on a thing to make a person feel a certain way. If you're not a great designer and you're a great artist, you know what to put on the page to express how you're feeling, right? They're just two sides of the same coin. Like, it's all art meant to evoke some kind of emotion or reaction from people. Even though those people are just yourself and your partner. Right? And so, yeah, the younger artists, I would say, create. If you feel like you don't feel like creating because you're too sad, because you're too angry, create anyway. If you feel like the things that you are creating in these feelings are garbage, don't throw them away, right? You can't imagine how much, what was it, a pencil drawing from Picasso when he was 7. sells for, right? Something that I'm sure he would have looked at in his, early 20s and like, oh, this is garbage. Don't throw your garbage away. Keep that stuff. Like, even if you don't want to sell it to anybody, or if somebody wants to buy it, you should sell it, because make your money on your art.
Yeah.
But even if you just want to just keep it in the closet for a while, just keep it. If for no other reason than to look back at it to see how far you've come with your craft. Just keep creating art. Make it, and then make it some more. Yeah, and that's it. Connect with me. If you want to make some art.
Awesome.
Listen to some poetry.
Yes.
I got you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing.
I'm so happy to be here.
If you want to connect with Brian, I've put his email in the episode description. You can also find him on Facebook under Brian Voice Porter Hawkins, or Instagram and Twitter, A Free Voice. I'm also on the internet at marajames.com and on Instagram at marajames. All right, take care of yourselves out there. Be tender with yourself, soft, compassionate, and I'll see you again next week.